Hey, what's up everyone? It's Shamrocked here, and I'm back with some more guides for you. This is going to be basically the start of my Season 4 guides. I'm going to do things a little bit differently to start. I'm going to try and take all of the current dungeons for this season and just make like a boss guide for each of the dungeons. So in the past, what I would do is I would kind of make like an individual guide per boss. I'm just going to change it up, make it easier for everybody. It's going to be per dungeon, and I'm going to bookmark each of the bosses so that you can kind of see how it's done. I'm also just not going to include the level in the title. You can assume that this is one of the harder keys. It's obviously not like the hardest, but it's hard at the time of actually creating this video. So if you're pushing later in the season, just note that it's probably going to be a similar difficulty level if you're pushing those higher end keys. So to start, we're actually going to be doing Halls of Infusion. The only reason I'm starting with this one is because I know a lot of people struggle with Khajin, which is the third boss, so hopefully this will be able to help you guys out if you are struggling. So to begin, let's go over the talents that I chose for this dungeon. All right, so we'll start with the left side. Keep in mind that this week one of the affixes is incorporeal, so because of that, you do have to spec into Hex. Hex actually isn't a bad talent for Halls of Infusion in general because it does help on the last boss if you do need to CC one of the ads. However, because there's only one ad phase now, it's sort of less important than it was back in Season 2. So really the big focus here on the left side of the tree is you really want to be fully talented into basically your totem enhancements. So you want to have totemic focus, which increases the duration of Cloudburst, which is the most important part of it for this kind of fight, or these kind of fights I should say. And then totemic surge, which reduces the cooldown of your totems. 6 seconds may not seem like a lot, but trust me, in a fight like Khajin where you're literally hanging on to every split second, 6 seconds can be a lifetime. So definitely talent into this. And talenting into these will also allow you to take Totemic Recall as well as Creation Core, which is fantastic for this fight. It's basically going to give you an extra free 2 Cloudburst totems, which is massive. Trust me, just massive. If you, for whatever reason, maybe it's a week with different affixes and you don't have enough utility to go all the way down into Creation Core, I definitely would advise that you at least take Totemic Recall and just get at least one free Cloudburst because you will likely need it with this fight. Moving on to the right side of the tree, which is probably the more important side when you're looking at a fight like this, this is the Chain Heal P-Wave build. Chain Heal and Primordial Wave. So there are other builds going around, specifically ones like what some of the other higher end shamans use, which is no Chain Heal, and that's basically you just capitalize on P-Wave and Ancestral Awakening. It's a very cool playstyle. It's a little bit harder to master, so if you're a beginner, I probably wouldn't recommend going that way first. It may be easier to get the hang of the Chain Heal and then maybe go from there once you've mastered the class a little bit. But if you're an experienced shaman and you want to try that out, I'd recommend watching like Lauren's stream or something like that because he's pretty good at it, and there are other shamans too that are doing it as well. So just go and check out one of their guides if you really want to play that playstyle. But this is sort of the old and gold. We're going to be doing Chain Heal with P-Wave, and specifically for this dungeon, I am playing Ancestral Reach, which is the talent that basically increases the healing of all chain heals by 8% no matter what, as well as increasing the bounce by 1. And this is in opposition to the other choice node here, which is Flow of the Tides, which I'll get into in my other videos. I actually think Flow of the Tides is very good this season, especially with their tier bonus and how it doesn't really capitalize on the amount of Riptides you have out anymore. So consuming Riptides is not as bad as it would have been in previous seasons, specifically last season and season 2. Some other important talents that I would take specifically for Halls of Infusion in general, but mostly for Khajin. And the reason I'm saying that is because you're kind of gated by that boss. Like pretty much everything you take is to deal with that boss on a Tyrant week. So because of that, I do take both Mana Tide Totem and Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem. This is, for me personally, invaluable when doing a fight like Khajin because mana is, a very precious resource, and depending on your group comp and how long your DPS take to actually kill the boss, you may need every little bit of mana that you can get. The fight, the recording for this one actually wasn't so bad. I think I end the fight with like 20% mana, which is pretty good. I do use a mana pot, and I get two uses of the Mana Tide Totem, so that definitely helps. And then just keep in mind, so I do have an Aug in my comp for this one, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Additionally, just moving further down, I have Tidebringer, I have High Tide, and then I have fully talented out Primordial Wave talents. In addition to that, I will advise that you download Spectra Shock's Weak Aura from Season 2. It is the undulation tracker, and I'll get a little bit further into that when we actually do the fight, but basically it's going to help you get some massive P waves out, which you could do without the tracker, but it's a lot more random. It's not really something that you can like count in your head, so getting Spectra Shocks or maybe someone else's Weak Aura that counts your undulation charges, or stacks, whatever you want to call them, will help you a lot in this fight. Okay, and without further ado, let's get into the first boss of the dungeon. Alright, so first up on the docket we have Watcher Irideus, which is the first boss of this dungeon. Just a quick note, if you're kind of new to my videos or you're returning, same thing as always, I've slowed down the video just ever so slightly so it's a little bit easier to follow along. And I also have an ability tracker in the top left corner so you can actually see what I'm casting and when, and you know, hopefully that just sort of helps you get a flow of what to do if that's why you're watching this video. So Watcher Irideus is not a hard boss, I would say. It can be a little bit awkward feeling until you get the hang of it, especially now because back in Season 2 when this was a boss, you could just have a Shadow Priest, or if you're a Priest Healer, just Mass Dispel every single set of debuffs, and that would make the fight fairly easy. But they've actually increased the cooldown on Mass Dispel, so now you're not going to have it for every single set of debuffs. So there are a couple different ways to handle it, but either way, the way that I used to heal this boss is the same way that I heal it now, and it still works totally fine. It felt a little bit clunky at first, but once again, after I got the hang of it, it feels fine. So starting this boss, you're probably going to be pulling it with a little bit of trash, which is fine. You're probably going to be pulling it with a little bit of defenders from the last pack. What's really important here is to use Primordial Wave pretty much as soon as the fight starts so that you get it on its cooldown so that it lines up for the next phase, and then get your undulation tracker to a stack of 2. And if you're unfamiliar with the 2-stack undulation with Primordial Wave tech, basically what this does is it makes all of the Primordial Wave healing wave cleaves do the extra like undulation healing. So they all, I think it's like 50% extra healing. So you basically get a massive healing wave on the entire group. And what's really nice is that it can also fill your Cloudburst Totem if it's down. So basically the rhythm of this fight is for every single static surge, which is the AoE he does, you want to be setting up your P wave and then get a Cloudburst down, do your healing wave to kind of get the initial heal in the group, and then throw in a few chain heals. For the first half of the fight, you shouldn't need to use a lot of cooldowns. Like, you should be saving your major cooldowns like Healing Tide, Ascendance, and Spirit Link for the second half of the fight. However, I would say it's smart to use Ancestral Guidance during the first half, as well as Mana Tide with your Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem, just because both of them will be up towards like later in the fight. But other than those, you should be able to keep the group alive just using your regular healing kit and maybe some of your other group's utility as well. So you'll see what I do once again is before this static surge comes out, I'm getting my undulation tracker to 2 and I'm setting my primordial wave out. You don't want to wait until the last second to get both of these, which you'll see I probably do at least once in this video, because you're not going to be able to catch up with that strat. If you do end up falling behind, you're probably going to have to, use a cooldown in order to catch up. But basically, when you put your Cloudburst Totem down right before the static surge starts, and then you like sort of go with your healing, the Cloudburst is going to heal the people with the debuffs, kind of like right before their debuff expires. And it's really nice because it means that you don't really have to waste a lot of mana pumping heals into them. You can just be confident that your Cloudburst is going to heal them up. But see, there you go here. If you ever do get into a situation where you're a little bit slow, and like for that, like I popped my P wave, but I didn't even have time to do a healing wave because I fell a bit behind there. Don't worry about trying to use it. Just use chain heal to at least get your group up to a point where you have time to cast healing wave, and then do that. Your P wave cleaves will be good. All right, so about halfway through this fight, you're going to get the intermission. It can be really simple, especially if your group has nice AoE stops. You basically need full-on stuns to control these little balls that come out. If you don't, but what they basically do is they do a cast and it puts a stacking dot on random people in the group, and it actually hurts quite a bit on tyrannical. Thankfully, you can dispel it, and if you're a dwarf, you can dwarf it. I'm sure other classes have ways of getting rid of it as well. But basically, my rule is I sort of wait and see if anybody gets 2 stacks, and then I'll dispel that, and then everybody else with like 1 stack I'll heal, or if I get it myself, I'll just dwarf it off. So if you're in comms with your group or who can get it off themselves, that should give you a good idea of like how to prioritize who's getting dispelled and who isn't. All right, so going into this next phase, same thing. I'm setting up my P wave. I'm starting off with a healing wave, and this time I am trying to use some of my big cooldowns in order to like keep up with the increased damage. So depending on how long your intermission takes, he's going to do increased damage depending on how many stacks he gets. And then also these power overload debuffs, once they drop, are going to drop like much bigger clouds of damage, clouds of bad, if you will. So it's a little bit, this phase is definitely a lot harder. That's why you want to save your cooldowns. So for this first set, I used Ascendance, but other than like actually popping my cooldowns, nothing else has changed. I'm doing the exact same strat that I was doing before. And once again, if you end up falling behind on your setup, just pop something like Spirit Link, Healing Tide, Ancestral Guidance, whatever, in order to help yourself catch up. Which honestly, in the second phase, it doesn't really matter if you fall behind anyways, because like you're going to be using a cooldown. So try your best to set up if you can, but otherwise, just make sure you have cooldowns to rely on. All right, and if you do happen to get the debuff, what we do is we have the group move, and then the 2 people with the debuff just like stay put, and then when they drop it, they run away. However, you can do it the opposite. You can actually have the people with the debuff move out, and then the rest of the group stay still. It's really just up to how the group wants to handle it. But what's really important for you is that you get into Ghost Wolf and you start running as soon as that debuff drops. Otherwise, you will get stuck in that cloud, and you're going to take a lot of damage. And trust me, it hurts, and there's not really a lot you can do unless you have some sort of personal up. Alright, so we're getting to the end of the fight here, and as you can see, I've pretty much cycled through all my cooldowns. I used Ancestral Guidance and Mana Tide at the beginning, like the first phase of the fight. They were both up for the second phase of the fight. And if you count each of those as 1 cooldown, you basically have 5 cooldowns to burn through in order to get through this second phase, which should be more than enough. And if for whatever reason it's not, and your group is taking longer than that to kill the boss, some unfortunate news is that you may not be able to time the dungeon because you're a little bit too slow. But some good news is that as long as your other group members have a little bit of utility, you can hopefully call for that, and you sort of supplement the areas where you might not have a cooldown if the fight is lasting really long. So for instance, if you have no Boker, you can use Zephyr. If you have a Demon Hunter, which you most likely will, because pretty much all the tanks are Demon Hunters right now, you can use Darkness. You can also call for people to use Personals, Health Pots. Basically, if you're running with a good group, or you're in comms and you can communicate, you should always be able to get through a phase with no cooldowns just through the use of things like health pots and defensives and all that. So anyways, that's Watcher Irideus, and now we're going to move on to Gulping Goliath, which is the second boss. So with Gulping Goliath, this is another fight where you want to start off the fight with as many Riptides out on the group as you can, and with your Undulation Tracker at 2. His first ability that he casts is going to be the Overpowering Croak. It's within like the first 5 seconds of the fight. 5 to 7 seconds of the fight. So basically, if you have Riptides on everybody, you can just throw a Healing Rain down once the fight starts, put down a Cloudburst Totem, and then your Healing Wave with your P-Wave Cleave should basically carry the group through that first Overpowering Croak. And the P-Wave actually lines up perfectly if you're taking the shorter one with every Overpowering Croak, so this is actually a really easy fight for Shamans. Our kit lines up perfectly with it. It's pretty great. So after that, he's going to use the Toxic Effluvia. The first one, you're not going to have Cloudburst to Carrier just because he casts it so late after the Overpowering Croak. But every subsequent time he does his round of abilities, if you pop down your Cloudburst in order to heal the Overpowering Croak, you will basically be able to use that Cloudburst healing to top the group up from the Toxic Effluvia. So just keep that in mind. So basically, it's a really easy rotation of healing and then setting up. So after he does the Toxic Effluvia, you basically have a good 10 seconds or so to set up the rest of your P-Wave setup. So you want to get your Riptides out on the group, get your Undulation Tracker to 2, and that's pretty much it. My cue to send out my Primordial Wave, like the actual cast, is when he does the Belly Slam. So once he does the Belly Slam, I use my Primordial Wave, and that's when I know that I have to be ready for the Overpowering Croak, because it's going to come out in like a next 5 or 6 seconds. That's also a great time to drop Healing Rain. So you kind of should be saving your Healing Rain cast. Between that, don't cast it while he's doing the Belly Slam, because then you're going to get into an awkward situation where it's going to be coming off cooldown during the Overpowering Croak, and you're not going to have it. So if you can, hold it until after that Belly Slam, like you can see I'm doing here, cast it, and then get everything ready. And yeah, that should pretty much carry you through the fight. Now, other than the actual setup and casting, because we have cooldowns, I actually don't think you really need to use them for this fight unless you're doing like a really high key, but because you have them, there's no reason not to use them. So this is another fight where you're kind of just going to cycle your cooldowns through each of the phases. Overpowering Croak is definitely the most dangerous part of this fight just because the damage ticks happen so quickly, and it does quite a bit of damage as well. So that's when you're going to want to use your Ancestral Guidance, your Ascendance, your Spirit Link, or your Healing Tide. Also, what makes it a little bit tricky is that each tick of Overpowering Croak will put a swirly underneath you. The swirly, like the frogs that drop down, they actually take a good like 2-3 seconds to drop, so you don't need to move immediately. You can usually get a cast off, and usually that cast is going to be your healing wave to get your primordial wave cleaves. So don't panic and don't run. If there is a situation where you feel like you're going to get hit, that's sort of where you save your Spirit Walker's Grace. Remember that you can cast that in the middle, like you can use Spirit Walker's Grace in the middle of a cast without canceling it. So that's a great option if you kind of panic and feel like you're going to get hit. You just pop Spirit Walker's Grace and then you can move out of the way without canceling your cast. If the situation arises where you, just like the first boss, where you kind of flubbed your setup or you're not ready, don't be afraid to just spam 2 chain heals with Tidebringer because they're going to be super fast, just to keep your group topped up enough so that they don't die from the Overpowering Croak, and then you can use your actual P-Wave Cleaves to sort of catch up and fill your Cloudburst for that Toxic Effluvia. But other than that, this boss, like I said, it's very much a clockwork boss as long as you guys are handling the little frogs correctly and moving back and forth as most groups will do because it's kind of the common strategy to use. You shouldn't have any issues with this boss. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the dreaded Khajin, which is a lot of people's both favorite boss and both like most hated boss. So yeah, let's look at that and I'll show you guys how I handle it. Alright, so with Khajin, this is another fight where you want to have your Primordial Wave with Undulation to set up before you actually start the fight, which is kind of funny. I think pretty much all the bosses in this dungeon are like that, except for maybe the last one. I mean, you could set it up, you just don't really need to. But yeah, so anyways, this is one, as you're kind of going into here, a couple of things. Make sure your group lets you drink and have full mana, and make sure you have Riptide on as many people as possible, and get that Undulation counter for 2 before you actually start the fight. You can see we're actually waiting here just because we have so much time. We figured we would just wait for some DPS cooldowns to come up, and then we're going to Lust on pull. On Tyrannical weeks, you should always have Lust for this boss. It's just going to make it far easier for you. If you're doing this boss without Lust, I mean, good luck, kudos to you, but if you have a kind, ethical group, they will hold Lust for this boss on Tyrannical weeks. Alright, so immediately starting this fight, I'm going to pop Mana Tide, as well as Ancestral Guidance, and I'm going to rip off my P-Wave Cleaves that I set up before the fight started. And that's going to, and also I'm going to do that all while I have a Cloudburst Totem down, and that's going to cover the first, 30 seconds or so of the fight very, very easily without spending hardly any mana. Other tips for this fight is you want to keep Healing Rain down at all times. If you spec into Totemic Recall and Creation Core, you're going to use that once you have no charges of Cloudburst left, which you'll see me do. I'll try to point it out. And also, you want to save Spirit Walker's Grace for if you get caught in a bad spot with these Glacial Surge rings, which you'll see actually here. I used mine pretty much right on the first one. And that's going to allow you to not have to cancel your casts and run away or run forward at a crucial moment in the fight. You'll see I'm pretty much also using Cloudburst on cooldown as well. The only time, I will try to hold it for a few seconds just so I'm not waiting too long between Cloudburst charges when I do fully run out and after I've used Totemic Recall. But it's pretty much going to be out the entire fight. And that's going to make it so you don't have to spend so much mana because everything you're healing sort of gets duplicated into your Cloudburst, and it allows you to just basically top everybody up if you're using it correctly with one nice little cast. Alright, so as you can see here, I'm slowing down, and I didn't have Cloudburst up, so I popped my Totemic Recall, I popped my Healing Tide to help me out in the interim there, and that just basically allowed me to catch up to the group a little bit. Other things that I would suggest are definitely using your personals on cooldown, basically if you can. I know it's tempting to save personals to when you're about to die, but think of it this way: if you use them on cooldown, you're going to get more uses out of them, and you're not going to have to spend more throughput, and then hopefully you're going to be saving more mana. This fight, the damage profile never changes. It's not like people are going to take spikes of damage. It's very easy to predict, after the first 30 seconds of the fight, how much HP everybody loses per tick, and then by that you can sort of gauge how much time you have before someone's actually going to die, and that should allow you to sort of know how much time you have to actually cast something, or if you don't. Other than that, so as you can see, we're over halfway through the fight. I've used all of my cooldowns except Spirit Link, and I already have Ancestral Guidance coming up. So right now I'm like totally chilling, and I'm at like 40% mana as well. And if you're someone who's really struggling with mana on this fight, I have 2 tips for you. One is to stack crit. Try and get any crit trinkets you have, crit gear, crit enchants, whatever you can, because crit is going to proc your Resurgence talent, which is going to allow you to get more mana back throughout the fight. The other tip I have is do not, and like this is probably one of the most crucial things for this fight, do not under any circumstance just spam chain heal, because you're gonna definitely run out of juice before the end of the fight. What you want to do is you want to trust in your healing surge, you want to trust in your healing wave, and you want to trust in your healing rain to tie you over between those primordial wave windows and between your high tide windows, right? So you should only be casting, if in a perfect world, you'd only cast chain heal when you have high tide up. However, if you are like really desperate and the whole group needs a nice chunky heal and you don't have high tide, you can still pop a chain heal, because you might get lucky, and if it crits on everybody, it's still going to do a lot of healing and it's going to juice up your cloudburst. But just remember, it comes at the cost of a lot of mana, so really only use it in desperate situations. Otherwise, make sure your group is also using whatever group utilities they have, whether it's Darkness, whether it's Zephyr, whether it's VE, maybe you have another Shaman, you can use Ancestral Guidance. If you are on comms with them, you can actually like let them know that when you are low on cooldowns or low on throughput, and that can sort of tie you over until you get something back up. Or another great idea, if you're not on comms, is just let the group know beforehand that you'll like ping when you're in trouble, and then just hit your ping button, and then they'll know that they either have to pop a defensive or pop a health pot, or use one of their throughput cooldowns. That I feel like is really helpful. The pinging system is so amazing for if you're not in comms, you can tag so many things. But other than that, yeah, it's really, this fight is all about keeping calm. I think it's one of the most fun fights because it kind of gets your adrenaline going and it makes you panic a bit. But really, if you get the hang of it and you stay calm and follow the tips that I've given here, trust me, you will get through it. It may take a little bit of practice, you may fail a few times, but once you get the hang of it, you really do get the hang of this boss. It's a lot of fun, and then at that point you can kind of just see how high up you can push, which, like I said, it's always really cool just to see on a boss like that how high we can push as shamans, because let's face it, as a shaman, as a Resto shaman, that fight is really hard to heal. It's definitely not as easy as some other healing classes have it. So, and with that being said, we will move on to the last boss, which is the Primal Tsunami. So this boss is a nice change of pace from the other 3. It's actually really easy. The only thing that makes this boss hard is that it has the ability to one-shot you. It can also be a little bit hard for the tank because it does have a pretty nasty tank buster. So as long as they have that part handled and the group has the one-shot part handled, this boss is really a piece of cake. So the nice abilities that we have to handle this are, first of all, we have Spirit Wolf. I actually didn't take Spirit Wolf because I have Rage Heart as well as Astral Shift. I also have like a crap ton of avoidance on my gear already, so that really helps me. But if you do not have those things, I would strongly suggest that you take Spirit Wolf. And basically what you can do is, as long as you have the group topped up and have Ancestral Vigor on the entire group before the Tempest Fury that he casts, you can sit in Spirit Wolf and get up to like 20% DR, which is probably going to save you every single time, unless you guys really mess up the intermission. So he'll start the fight, he'll do Tempest Fury. It won't be buffed up because you haven't done the intermission. Like, nobody should die on the first Tempest Fury unless like you're doing a really high key, at which case you're probably not watching this guide. But before every Tempest Fury, including the ones in phase 1, just put a nice little chain heal on the entire group, because it is going to put Ancestral Vigor on everybody, which is, the 10% health increase, which is pretty huge. Even in phase 1, yeah, so just make sure you have it in your head. If you see Tempest Fury coming up, 5 seconds or less, make sure you're ripping off a chain heal just on everybody. And obviously make sure everybody is topped up as well. Other than that, you want to stay sort of stacked as a group, and once the globules come out, you just sort of like move to the left or right. You should decide beforehand with your group. Try to stay as a unit, and that way you're going to bait all the globules together, and it's just going to make the fight a lot more, there's going to be a lot less area denial for you guys to work around with. Once the intermission starts, as you can see, you just sort of run through. Take your time. It's important to be fast, but it's more important not to die. And also remember, you can use the very outer edges of the bridge and dodge, the balls that way. So really, it's just about moving, left and right to dodge the big waves, and you should make it to the end no problem. So because there's only one intermission phase, most groups, and most, like I said, most groups are running with a Demon Hunter, which is like basically crowd control experts. We basically had our group, everybody would interrupt their own dude, and then you'd be responsible for their first stop. The tank would group them all together, and then you coordinate group stops to stop everything. We actually let one cast go off there, and if this was a high enough key, if this was like a 17, it probably would have killed everyone. So you definitely need to, try to not let any cast go off at all. All right, so going into the second phase, the Tempest Fury is obviously going to hit a lot harder. Same rules apply. You want to make sure you have Ancestral Vigor on everybody, make sure everybody's topped up, and then usually you want to coordinate a group defensive for every single one, or personals. So for that one, I use Rage Heart. I believe for the next one, we're going to use Spirit Link. We may use Zephyr as well. Like I said, I'm not too worried about this one because it's a 15, it's not a 16 or a 17. So with Ancestral Vigor and Fort Buff, which we have both of, that's 15% health increase, nobody should be getting one shot by this. But in those higher keys, it is something to be careful of. So make sure you have yourself covered, like I said, via Spirit Wolf, via Rage Heart, via Ward, via Astral Shift. And like I said, the group should be, everybody in the group should be able to have their own self covered. A great thing you can do if you do have anyone squishy, like for instance, like we have the Evoker, that is obviously squishier than everybody else in this group, you can put Earth Shield on that person before the Tempest Fury. And that is going to reduce the damage they take by 6%, which can be enough to keep them alive. Other than that, you should definitely be putting Earth Shield on the tank for the Tank Buster. Once again, 6% doesn't sound like a lot, but on those higher keys where a lot of abilities, kill you by just a little bit of overkill, it can be the difference between someone living and someone dying. But that's it for that boss. Super easy, and that is actually it for this entire video. Once again, like I said, I'm actually doing boss videos for all of the dungeons, so please stay tuned, and I will see you next time.